Hello again to another Agakala reaction. Today is going to be part 3 of How Islam Saved Western Civilization, and I checked. We were at the mark of 42 minutes 2 weeks ago, so we gonna start at 41 minutes and 7 seconds, just to kind of like get into the feel what was happening last time. And let's just go into it because it's really interesting. I was actually looking forward to that. And I do have to apologize straight away because unfortunately something's going on with my the webcam or my recording program, and sometimes my freeze. So I'll be looking up here like that every now and then to just make sure that I'm not frozen. If you watched my yesterday's video, you probably seen what I meant. And there was happened something like that last week too. So, okay, let's just go and just see. And it's a Roy Casagranda from the Austin School, and the title of the talk is How Islam Saved Western Civilization, and I'm really enjoying it. So, okay, let's go.
Like this mystery. My point is that when we think of people, we stick an identity marker on them. And the identity markers can be really complicated because they can involve nationality, they can involve religion, they can involve race.
Yeah.
Right? And those identity markers that were important at one point might be not important later on.
True.
And so in the mix, when we have a conversation about Western civilization and the West, and then how we think of ourselves, that's what this is also about. And usually when we say the West, we think of Athens and Rome and England and maybe even Germany and France, reluctantly Spain.
Why reluctant?
And even though we think of Rome, we're probably a little iffy about Italy.
Yeah, I remember that.
Which is another contradiction in this thing, right? So let me give you an example of what I mean by this. So when I was taught the part where they talk about the steam engine, I'm probably remembering this incorrectly, but I swear at one point, probably third grade, I have it in my head, and I'm probably wrong, I was taught that Robert Fulton invented the steam engine. Now the funny thing about that, of course, is the steam engine was like a century old at that point, so it'd be really hard for him to have invented the steam engine, but it's the same type of story that we did with everything, right? Ben Franklin invented the glasses. It's not true. He didn't invent the glasses. That Henry Ford invented the car. Again, not true. Even the stuff that you think is true is probably wrong. It looks like an Australian family did flight before the Wright brothers, and an English guy definitely did the light bulb before Edison. In other words, everything we were taught was wrong at that level. But okay, so then later on in my life, by the time I'm in college, I was taught that the steam engine was invented by Thomas Savery and Thomas Newcomen. Savery did the first one, and then Newcomen did the next one. And so, you needed to mention both of them. Cool, that's interesting, but it's not true. There was an Italian before Thomas Savery, a guy named Giovanni Branca, who did a steam engine before him. In fact, there was a guy before him, a Spaniard. His name was Geronimo I'm having a COVID brain moment. De Ayans y Beaumont. I think that's his name. We're going to go with that. And he invented the steam engine like 200 years before Robert Fulton stuck one in a boat. 100 years before Thomas Savery and Thomas Newcomen. And honestly, that's not the start of the steam engine either. There was a Turk named Taqi-ad-Din who invented the steam engine in 1551,
wow.
60 years before the Spaniard did it in the Ottoman Empire. In fact, that's still not the birth of the steam engine. The steam engine was made by a guy named Heron. Heron was in the Library of Alexandria in Egypt. And he made the steam engine 1,500 years before Taqi-ad-Din. We've had the steam engine for 2,000 years now.
That's wow, incredible.
Now, when I mentioned Heron, I didn't say it. I almost said it, but I caught myself. I almost said he was a Greek from Alexandria, Egypt, at the Great Library who invented the steam engine. And the reason I caught myself is because of the identity thing, which I'm not done talking about. But before I move away from Heron, I just want to point out what he did. He made 2 steam engines, in fact. One of them was actually a static rocket, and it just spun. So he didn't just invent the steam engine, he also invented the world's first ever rocket. It didn't go anywhere, but it was a rocket. The other thing he did was he made a mechanical play with gears. I was also taught that the gear was invented like 300 years ago. But he, 2,000 years ago, made a play that actually had gears in it. In fact, we now have a thing called the Antikythera device. The Antikythera device was found off the coast of Antikythera. It's a metal box. For the longest time, archaeologists had no idea what to do with it. Somebody went, what if we x-rayed it? And they did it. They x-rayed it. It has gears in it. The thing is 2,000 years old. And then they figured out what it was. Well, recently, we finally figured out what this thing was. It was a computer. It was an analog computer, a mechanical computer, not a digital computer. It wasn't electronic. It had gears in it. And what you would do is you would enter the date on the top, and then it would rotate the constellations into place. So it was an astronomical computer, so you could know what constellations you would see that night.
Huh.
Think about how complicated it would have been to put that kind of data into the form of gears and then stick it into a box and make it work. Where you're putting something as complicated as a date into it by rotating the gears. This is not nothing. So Heron had this thing with gears in it, with levers, by the way, with bells and whistles on it. You would turn it on, and then you would go sit down and watch. And what the gears would do is it would cause the scenes to shift, and you could have an object move across. For example, you could have waves, and then a boat, and then you could have sound effects with the bell and the whistle and the clacking. And then the scene could shift because you had all these different things that would move into place. And you could have a scene where a boat goes across the water and lands on the shore and a hero moves out. In other words, he invented a TV. It was just a mechanical TV. 2,000 years ago. Isn't that crazy? Is that crazy? Now, I said already, I almost admitted to you is Greek. So let me tell you why I'm telling you this. So my family from my father's mother, so my grandmother's family, are Finlandssvenskar. That means a Swede from Finland. So I was raised to believe I was a Swede, because Swedes are cool. And I was raised to be racist against Finns. Is it racist? Are Finns a race? Anti-nationalist against Finns, there, because Finns are a nation, not a race. So in other words, I was taught, Finns suck, Swedes are wonderful. Now, here's the weird thing about Finlandssvenskar, is there's Swedes from Finland.
But?
And the reason there were Swedes in Finland is Sweden conquered Finland. So they were the nobles who went in to rule Finnish land and peasantize the Finns. So they were not good guys.
No,
and they ruled over Finland in this really nasty way for centuries. And then in the Napoleonic Wars, Sweden picked the wrong side, and they sided with the French. The French lost. I don't know if you know that. Napoleon was defeated. And so as part of Sweden's punishment, Russia took Finland from it. The Russians then went to the Swedes living in Finland, and they said, hey, you guys know how to control these Finns and rule them. You already have your little fiefdom set up with barons and dukes and counts and stuff. You keep doing that, but in our name, and we'll leave you where you are and you just pay us taxes. And the Finlandssvenskar went, yeah, that's a good deal. So basically we lost nothing losing to you in the war. And they're like, yeah, sure. That's how you want to feel about it. In other words, the Finlandssvenskar are not the most popular people in Finland. They're about 6% of the population, and it's an ugly history. I'm owning this. I'm not.
When isn't there an ugly history within a nation of like, and then having someone else with different background? If you kind of look at the history, like if you look deeper into different countries' histories, you will find kind of ugly histories like that. And it's just, I think it's in nature of humans that they need something or someone to kind of like go after to just make them feel better, that, oh, I'm better than you. So, and it's not just like a person to person, but more like a group to group of people. And that's what I think anyway. I'm trying obviously be kind of open-minded, and I'm kind of like what he said. Oh, he almost said that the other guy in Alexandria was Greek, but I'm always kind of trying to, like, I've noticed that people always add this, like, oh, this is the Polish guy, or this is a British guy, or this is American guy or woman, or a white or Asian, or coming from this town, or there's always something to kind of describe someone, even if it doesn't have any need for it, you know, like there's someone trying to say a story, you're probably going to catch yourself on describing them with something that have nothing to do with story, it doesn't add anything to that story. So yeah, that's what I think anyway. Okay, let's go back. And we are at what? 50 minutes. Okay, so the 10 minutes of
watching. Try and sugarcoat or gaslight you. My ancestors were on the wrong side, just so we're clear. Mm-hmm. Until World War II, and then we made up for it. The Swedes fought side by side with the Finns against the Russians, and all is forgiven. And the Finns and the Swedes are like the Bopsy twins of Europe now. I don't know if you caught this in the news a few months ago, but the Prime Minister of Finland said we want to join NATO, but we can't unless the Swedes join. And it's because Finland will never do anything without Sweden, and Sweden will never do anything without Finland. And Sweden said, we've been holding on to our neutrality for a long time, but if you need to join NATO, and we think you do because the Russians are a real threat, we have to join NATO to support you. Like, that's how their relationship is. They're very cute. They should totally just get married and get it over with. They are. They're already married. So in other words, if I went to Finland, even though there might be some latent resentment left, I'm probably okay. I'm not like scared or anything about it.
I say he's not scared because he's not really, he said his his dad's mom's family, so this is like a quarter of his background. And anyway, most people in Europe will just see him as American, so.
23andMe. Don't do 23andMe if you're a racist. I'm just telling you right now. It's gonna upend your entire worldview of yourself. It turns out my grandmother was mostly Finnish.
You see?
Oh.
Well,
so
yeah.
Now I have to spend years now trying to overcome my anti-Finnishness and embrace the fact that I'm more Finnish than Swedish.
Mm-hmm. And I'm Finnish. No, you're American.
So she had a Swedish name. She spoke Swedish. She identified as Swedish. It's just genetically she was mostly Finnish. See how complicated this got all of a sudden? But now here's the really weird twist, and it's why I'm bringing this up. If you're a 6% minority in a place, and you only want to breed with your own nation,
oh, yeah.
It's gonna get cousiny really fast. You know what I mean? You're probably doing your children and grandchildren a huge disservice. At some point, you're gonna want to open up to the possibility of marrying into one of the locals. And that's what my ancestors did. So what I am is I'm paternally Swedish, and I had a Swedish male ancestor who married a Finn, and then maybe he married a Swede, that child married a Swede, but then there were like 2 more Finns, and then a Swede again. In other words, as time went by, we effectively became genetically Finnish, because that Swedish DNA just kept shrinking every time there was a marriage to a local. And that's what happened to Heron. When the Greeks conquered Egypt, 300 years before Heron's birth, the Greeks definitely separated themselves out from the Egyptians because they saw the Egyptians as inferior. But after 15 generations, there was no way Heron wasn't part Egyptian. In other words, calling Heron the Greek scientist from Egypt is really an interesting proposition, because how Greek was he?
Right, so, because I kind of see it this way, when he said he was a Greek scientist from Egypt, it was kind of like, to me, it was kind of like he was saying, well, he was born in Greece, and then he moved to Egypt, to Alexandria, to be able to kind of work in the library. But now he's saying, so the Heron was actually born in Egypt, and his parents were born in Egypt, and so that, in my mind, that makes him Egyptian, not just Greek.
Was he? After 15 generations in Egypt, how Greek were the Greeks? If nothing else, their culture was modified by the Egyptians they lived around. Their DNA was modified because you know they were marrying into them, not Cleopatra. But when I said Cleopatra, you went, oh, the Egyptian pharaoh, the woman, Cleopatra.
No, but she moved there, isn't it?
I'm keeping track. I know y'all mostly aren't. Cleopatra the Seventh is the famous one.
Huh.
Cleopatra the Seventh, that you identify as Egyptian, was 0% Egyptian.
Because she moved there to marry, isn't it?
Family tree is wonky and difficult because on 2 occasions she had an uncle marry a niece. So I don't know how to do this because I can't count the generations back, because what am I supposed to do with the niece-uncle thing? Twice. So there's 2 ways to count it, right? You count 7 generations because you count the niece as a separate generation, or 5 generations and you make your life not a nightmare. So I'm doing 5. If you go back 5 generations, the way to do this, the math on this, the math is fun, and the really cool thing is just about everything in the universe can be described as by math, right? You take 2 to the power of the generation you're trying to go to. So you're 0 generations away from you, 2 to the 0 power is 1. Your parents are 1 generation away from you, 2 to the first power is 2. Your grandparents are 2 away from you, so 2 squared is 4. Your great-grandparents are 2 cubed, that's 8. By the time you go 5 generations back, so 3 greats and then grandparents, you end up with 32 ancestors. You should have 32 great-great-great-grandparents. She had 4. A Persian and 3 Greeks. It's actually worse if you go 1 generation forward, you go to the 4th generation, she only had 2. And then when she got to the 2,
I'm confused.
That 2 had 3 kids. One of the kids married his niece. His niece was the product of his brother and sister. So I don't even know where to go other than, oh.
Did he just said the niece that he married, it was his brother's and sister's child? This is literally like Game of Thrones all over the place. Damn.
Oh my God.
Isn't it? One more.
Brother and sister. So I don't even know where to go other than, oh my God.
Yeah. I'm with him on that. Literally, I'm with him on that. Oh, by the way, I keep forgetting to check.
Notice what we do. We go Cleopatra the Egyptian, Heron the Greek.
Huh, yeah.
Heron was definitely very Egyptian by the time we got to the 1st century AD. Cleopatra was definitely very not Egyptian at all in any way, shape, or form, because she had been so secluded from Egyptian culture because the Greeks looked down on the Egyptians so intensely that they went out of their way to inbreed to try to prevent Egyptian DNA from entering the royal family. It's intense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me give you another example of what I mean by this. The guy who invented philosophy. Some people call him Thales. Americans usually say Thales. So I'm just going to say Thales to make our lives easy. Thales, the Greek philosopher who invented philosophy, wasn't Greek. He wasn't Greek. Isn't that cool? The guy who invented Greek philosophy wasn't Greek. He lived in a Greek city. The city was called Miletos. Miletos is today in Turkey. He spoke Greek, but he also spoke Phoenician because his family was from Lebanon. They were Phoenicians. They had moved to Miletos for business purposes. He grew up in Miletos and then produced the world's first ever work of philosophy, a book titled Water is Best. A Phoenician invented philosophy in a Greek city in what is today Turkey. But when we think of Thales, we think of a Greek. When we think of Heron, we think of a Greek. When we think of Cleopatra, we think of an Egyptian. That's what I mean. What we do is we have this tendency to be selective with how we apply the identities. Mm-hmm. And that gets all sorts of messy. Okay, so now let's do this. Let's shift. Now that I've got you thinking about identity and how we're careless with it, now I want to found Western civilization. So what is it that makes something West and something not West? So this is part of the reason why my title was meant to bring out contradictions. The East-West paradigm at some level is nonsensical because it assumes that there isn't connectivity with the other side and cultural sharing. So at some level, there is no Western civilization. That's a construct that's part of our imagination. At another level, there is a Western civilization because there is a geographical region that had a lot more connection with other places than with other places. One way to think of this then would be if you made the Indus River the boundary for Western civilization. Everything to the west of the Indus is Western civilization. But that doesn't mean everything to the east of the Indus is Indus civilization, or is Eastern civilization, because if nothing else, Indian civilization is so different from Korean or Japanese civilization, right? It's preposterous actually to start lumping together. But everything west of the Indus does have strong connectivity, and here's why. It's the Mediterranean. When we think of bodies of water, we usually think of them as dividers. That's because of our bias. The Pacific and the Atlantic are dividers because they're so big. They really do divide the old world from the new world. But the Mediterranean isn't a divider, it's a connector. It has the exact opposite role. It's just small enough of a body of water that getting across it isn't too
difficult. Yeah. Well, obviously, so far. Let's see. Okay, well, I'm not sure how far are we actually. But yeah, so far he's absolutely right. And I was kind of going into looking like, oh, we do like to throw all those names and put something, oh, he's Greek, she's Egyptian. When, as far as I know, well, obviously I'm not that good with the history and he does explain it why, but she's not Egyptian. I thought that she wasn't even born in Egypt, she was born somewhere else, but then who knows? Like, we're gonna have to look more into it. But so far, oh, we have 22 minutes of recording, so that's quite long. I'm gonna have to check out the length. There you go. Ooh. Whoops. And are we up to what? Hour. So that's about 20 minutes of watching. Okay, another 5 minutes and then we're gonna finish.
It's insulated enough that it does have tempests, which are the Mediterranean cyclones, but they're never as intense as hurricanes. Mm-hmm. The ancient world, you just didn't sail during the tempest season, which was basically fall and winter. You just stayed out of the seas, and yeah, that way you could avoid it. And so what ends up happening is the Mediterranean connects because it's a highway. It's way easier to move goods and people by boat than it is by land. Land is a pain because you've got to build a road, then you've got to maintain the road, you've got to make wagons, and the wheels are constantly breaking, and you can hardly put anything in a wagon, and then you have all these stupid animals you have to feed, right? And they need water or they'll die, and right? So if you're trying to get from Egypt to Morocco, don't go by land, go by sea. You'll get there really fast, it'll be very efficient, and your life will be relatively easy. So what ends up happening then is all the civilizations near and around the Mediterranean end up intimately connected together. So if we accept that premise, then yeah, there is some regionalism to it, even though at some level it's still a little bit of an artificial device. In other words, I'm admitting that we're maybe doing a little bit of a stretch here, but let's do it anyway for the sake of the exercise. So okay, so we've accepted that it was born in Iraq and Egypt, and then we've created a geographical boundary for it. Now we can talk about the elements.
Okay,
So
we're gonna leave this here, and we're just gonna watch, because it's it's not even 5 minutes, but okay, we're just gonna finish here. We're at 1 hour and 1 minute. Almost 2 minutes out of 2 hours 13. And we're gonna leave the rest for another few weeks. In 2 weeks time, I'm gonna watch another 20-25 minutes. I think this is a good spot to kinda stop. We're gonna just basically watch it again about the elements of the Western civilization. And so far I learned a lot. Like the thing about the steam engine, like I knew that majority people would be saying, oh, this is who invented the steam engine. It wasn't right. It's just the same with the cars, you know, like a lot of, especially Americans, are gonna say, oh, the Ford, what was his name? Something Ford invented the car, but it wasn't. It was some German guy, isn't it? So yeah, okay. Was really good. As always, this one is kind of like switching from one to another, but it's a lot of information to kind of, and new information to me as well. So it's again thank you very much for recommending to me, and I really enjoy it. And we're gonna watch more of it in 2 weeks time, and we'll see me tomorrow watching something else. So thank you very much. Bye.